A Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe owner in 2025 received their third recall notice in just 2 years for the exact same problem on the same car. 3 separate times, Jeep told them that the battery fire risk had been fixed. 3 separate times, it hadn't. Isn't that crazy? Well, that's just one of the 11 different cases we'll be discussing today in this video. So sit back, relax, subscribe, and let's get started. At number 11, we have 3 different Kia models: the Soul, the Sportage, and Seltos. Kia recalled around 39,000 vehicles due to a faulty electric oil pump used with the auto stop and start system. To understand why this is a problem, you need to understand what that system actually does. The auto stop and start system, which Kia calls idle stop and go, is a fuel-saving feature that automatically shuts the engine off completely every time you stop at a red light or get stuck in traffic. The moment you release the brake, the engine restarts. Because the engine shuts off, it stops pumping oil through the engine the normal way. So Kia uses a separate electric oil pump to keep oil circulating through the engine while it is switched off, protecting the engine components from running dry when it restarts. The electronic controllers inside those oil pumps were damaged during manufacturing by their supplier. That damage means controller cannot properly regulate the pump. It overheats, and an overheating electric component sitting idle inside your engine bay, surrounded by oil, fuel lines, and rubber, is a fire waiting to happen. Kia reported 6 incidents of localized melting before the recall was issued. Though no fires or injuries had been reported at that point, owners were told to park outside and away from their structures until the dealer inspected and replaced the oil pump controller free of charge. Talk about losses, Kia had to incur a large sum to fix this problem. Toyota has spent decades building a reputation around one idea: their cars don't break. This obsession runs deep, baked into their manufacturing philosophy, their culture, their identity. The GR Supra, specifically the 4-cylinder 2-liter version sold between 2020 and 2022, is assembled by BMW at their factory in Graz, Austria. It shares an engine, BMW's B48 turbocharged 4-cylinder, with half the BMW lineup. And in September 2025, BMW discovered that the starter relay on that engine could corrode if water got inside. Corroded relay means a short circuit. Short circuit means heat. Heat in the wrong place means fire, whether the car is running or sitting parked with the key out. BMW had already logged 10 thermal events across their own vehicles before the recall was filed. The 3 Series, 5 Series, X3, and X4 were all recalled. And since the Supra uses the same starter assembly, it came along for the ride. All 1,469 of them. Toyota ran their own check. 0 US field reports, 0 warranty claims. Not a single Supra had actually exhibited the same problem. They were included in the recall purely as a precaution, because the hardware was identical and the risk, however remote, was real. The instruction to owners were simple: park outside, away from structures, until the dealer can replace the starter. 1,469 people who bought a Toyota, specifically because it was a Toyota, told to keep it outside their garage because of something BMW did. Next up is Hyundai Palisade. Spend $50,000 on a brand new family SUV, and there's a reasonable set of expectations that come with it. Comfortable seats, third row space, a warranty, the general understanding that a car built this year with a price tag won't be sending you a letter 3 months later telling you to keep it outside of your garage. In May 2025, 620 Palisade owners got the letter anyway. Somewhere along the production line, a spring inside the tooling used to apply that seal had been damaged, and because of that, a gap formed which lets moisture through. Once moisture reaches a circuit board sitting next to oil, there are risks of short circuit, heat, and fire. Hyundai found out on March 21, 2025 when a supplier flagged a problem with one pump. Engineer traced it back to the tooling defect within days, identified which vehicles were affected, and filed the recall with NHTSA by May 6th, which is pretty fast compared to other recalls over the years. Thankfully, there was no property damage. Just 620 people who had bought one of Hyundai's most popular family SUVs were recalled out of the nearly 37,000 sold that year. Hyundai covered the fix entirely. Dealers would replace the oil pump controller free of charge, no questions asked. Anyone who had already paid out of their pocket for the repair would be reimbursed. But until it was fixed, the owners were advised to keep the car out of the garage. Volvo's entire identity is built around safety. They invented the 3-point seatbelt system in 1959 and gave the patent away for free so every car manufacturer in the world could use it. That single decision has saved over 1 million lives. For decades, Volvo has leaned into this legacy harder than any other automaker. So in January 2026, when NHTSA announced that the 2025 Volvo EX30 carried a fire risk serious enough to warrant parking outside, it landed differently than most recalls. The EX30 is Volvo's smallest and most affordable electric SUV, and the battery cells inside certain versions of it were supplied through Shandong Geely Shandong Power Battery Corporation, a Chinese joint venture operated by Volvo's parent company, Geely. During the manufacturing of those cells, a deficient process allowed lithium plating to develop, microscopic metal deposits accumulating inside the battery over time, growing slowly until they bridge the gap between the cells and cause an internal short circuit. A short circuit inside a high-voltage lithium battery at a high state of charge generates heat, and heat in that context can escalate into a fire, whether the car is being driven or sitting parked. Volvo's instructions to owners were more restrictive than almost any other recall on this list. Charging was to be capped at 70% and vehicles were to be parked outside and away from any structures until the fix was completed. The remedy when it came was a full replacement of the affected battery module, a repair Volvo committed to covering entirely at no cost to owners. Globally, 40,323 EX30s were caught in the recall. The battery module replacements are estimated to cost Volvo around $195 million worldwide, which goes some way to explaining why the company initially filed the recall without a confirmed remedy. Engineers were still working out whether a software fix could avoid a full hardware replacement. It could not. At number 7, we have Hyundai Kona Electric from 2019 and 2020. The problem was in the battery. LG Energy Solution, who supplied the batteries, manufactured them with folded anode tabs inside the cells. That defect causes internal short circuit which generates heat with no warning. The car didn't even need to be turned on. Just park it and it heats up. 13 battery fires erupted globally. 3 happened in South Korea while the cars were simply sitting idle with a full charge. 2 more in Canada, 1 in Europe. Every single one of those vehicles were turned off. Hyundai recalled 82,000 vehicles worldwide. The fix wasn't a software update or a patch. They had to replace the entire battery on every single unit. That cost Hyundai $900 million. Ouch. That must have been a big blow to the company and even bigger blow to the cars that had actually catch fire. Until that replacement was done, NHTSA told every owner the same thing: park outside, away from structures, and do not charge overnight. Here's what makes it even worse. This was an electric vehicle. People bought it specifically to charge overnight at home, save money on fuel, and reduce emissions. Instead, they were told that the exact thing that makes an EV useful, overnight charging, is now forbidden. And they couldn't park it in their garage either. I mean, just imagine you bought a car, drove around, then parked inside your garage. Who would think that even if turned off, it can cause massive fires with no warnings at all? For anyone buying a used 2019 or 2020 Kona Electric today, the only safe move is demanding proof that the battery replacement was completed. The Mercedes-Benz EQB is the electric version of the GLB class, a compact boxy SUV that seats up to 7 people. The batteries inside certain versions of it were supplied by Faurecia Energy, a Chinese manufacturer, and a defect in those cells from an early production period is what put nearly 12,000 EQBs on the list. The defect itself comes down to cell stability. Battery cells from that early Faurecia production run less robust than they should have at high states of charge. Under the right combination of stress factors, current ripples from charging equipment, minor mechanical pressures on the battery pack, those cells can develop an internal short circuit. And as we have already discussed, internal short circuits in high voltage lithium battery produces heat, and that heat can escalate into fires. Owners may see a battery warning in the instrument cluster if a problem develops while driving. What separates the EQB recall from almost any others on this list is how many times Mercedes tried to fix it before getting it right. The first recall, filed in early 2025, addresses the problem with a software update on the battery management system. The update was designed to regulate charging behavior and reduce stress on the vulnerable cells. Mercedes worked through repairs, completing it on roughly 74% of the affected vehicles. Then, 2 EQBs that had already received that software update caught fire. Mercedes and Ferraris went back into the data, cell teardowns, battery teardowns, laboratory analysis, on-site production inspections. The conclusion was that the software update effectiveness could not be fully confirmed across all affected vehicles. A software change manages how a battery is used. It cannot fix a physical defect inside the cell itself. In January 2026, Mercedes committed to replacing the entire high-voltage battery pack in every affected vehicle free of charge, and filed a third recall covering 11,895 EQBs. Until the replacement batteries are installed, owners are advised to keep charging capped at 80% and park outside and away from structures. The Volkswagen ID.4 is VW's primary entry into the American electric SUV market, and 2025 was actually a strong year for it. Sales climbed 31% year-on-year to over 22,000 units. The most serious of the recalls trace back to a manufacturing defect at SK Battery America, the supplier responsible for the ID.4's high-voltage battery cells. During production, certain cells were assembled with misaligned electrodes, a physical shift in the internal structure of the cell that compromises its stability. Volkswagen first became aware of the problem in January 2024 after an ID.4 caught fire in Illinois. More incidents followed. California in July 2024, Utah later that year, Colorado in August 2025. Each time, VW and SK Battery America traced the fire back to the high-voltage battery, but the varying conditions under which the fires occurred made it difficult to pinpoint the exact defect. The breakthrough came in August 2025 when a teardown of one of the damaged battery modules confirmed the presence of shifted electrodes. By January 2026, Volkswagen had filed two separate recalls with NHTSA tied to the misaligned electrode issue, first covering 311 vehicles identified in December 2025, then expanded to 670 vehicles produced between November 2022 and September 2024. A third large recall covering 43,881 ID.4s from 2023 to 2025 models addressed a separate software issue where missing self-discharge defect software could allow thermal propagation to go undetected. Combined, the three recalls accounted for 44,551 vehicles. Every owner received the strictest instruction: park outside immediately after charging, never leave vehicle charged indoors overnight, avoid level 3 DC fast chargers entirely, and cap the battery at a maximum of 80% charge. The Kia Telluride is one of the most decorated family SUVs of the last decade. It won Motor Trend SUV of the Year. It topped almost every three-row family SUV comparison test it entered. It became the car people recommended to friends, the one that showed Kia could go head-to-head with anyone. And then nearly 500,000 owners, 462,869 of them, got a letter telling them to keep it out of their garage. That defect had nothing to do with the engine or the battery. It's the front power seat motor. Inside that motor is a slide knob that controls the forward and backward movement of the seat. Unaffected 2020 to 2024 Tellurides, that knob can get stuck in an engaged position. When it does, the motor keeps trying to move the seat that isn't moving anymore. It just runs and runs. Because of that non-stop running, it can generate massive amounts of heat, enough to start melting. And in the wrong conditions, it can even cause fires to erupt. Kia had already documented one confirmed underseat fire and 6 separate incidents of localized melting between August 2022 and March 2024 before the recall was filed. Fortunately, there was no recorded injuries, but one actual fire underneath the seat is enough. Kia made the call to recall on May 29, 2024, covering every Telluride built between January 9, 2019 and May 29, 2024. The fix is straightforward. Dealers installed a bracket for the power seat and replaced the slide knobs entirely free of charge. The Ford Ranger is Ford's mid-size pickup truck, and in April 2026, 140,201 owners of the 2024, 2025, and 2026 models received letters telling them to stop parking their trucks in enclosed spaces due to fire risk. The cause was a wiring harness near the sun visor and headliner that was either pinched or pressed against metal edges inside the A-pillar, the column that sits between the windshield and front door. This happened during assembly at Ford's Michigan plant, where two problems crept in. The protective tape around the wiring was sometimes too thick to pass cleanly through its sheet metal openings, and workers lacked tight enough controls over exactly how the harness was rerouted. Both scenarios left the wire rubbing against metal, and over time that friction strips the insulation away. A bare wire against metal creates an electric short, and that short sits right next to the driver. Making things worse, the truck's body control module, the computer managing its electric functions, was designed to restart itself when it detected a fault in the sun visor circuit rather than shut it down. So instead of stopping, the short just keeps cycling. The good news is that the problem gives warning before it gets serious. Flickering or dead sun visor mirror lights and erratic overhead console behavior both signal that the fault is developing. Ford has already recorded 4 different field reports between July and September 2025, 1 vehicle fire and 3 with scorching or smoke near the sun visor circuit before the recall was filed. The repair covers both the hardware and software. Dealers inspect and replace damaged wiring harnesses, and every truck in the recall gets a body control module update that cuts power to the sun visor when replaced faults are detected. Both fixes are free, with full remedy letters going out to owners in August 2026. The Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe is Jeep's plug-in hybrid SUV, a family vehicle that runs on a combination of 2-liter turbocharged engine and a Samsung SDI high-voltage battery pack. In November 2025, 91,844 Grand Cherokee 4xe owners covering model years 2022 to 2026 were told to stop charging their vehicles and park them outside and away from structures. That instruction came with no confirmed repair date. Just park it outside and wait. The problem is inside the battery cells supplied by Samsung SDI. Each lithium-ion cell contains a separator, a thin membrane that keeps the positive and negative components of the cell apart. In certain cells, that separator is damaged. When it falls, the two sides of the cell make direct contact, creating an internal short circuit that generates heat. And we all know what happens after. What makes this entry particularly notable is that this was not the first attempt at fixing the problem, or the second. Jeep had already recalled 42,000 Wrangler 4xe models in late 2023 after 5 fires and applied a software update. That wasn't enough. In September 2024, the recall was expanded to 154,000 vehicles covering both the Wrangler and Grand Cherokee 4xe, this time with a software update and battery pack replacement where diagnostics flagged a problem. By July 2025, the company opened a new investigation after receiving reports of fire in vehicles that had already received the 2024 fix. 9 fires had occurred in vehicles that went through the previous recall repair. 10 more fires involved battery cells that were outside the scope of that recall entirely. The software fix had not solved it. The November 2025 recall covered 320,065 vehicles in the US alone, 228,225 Wrangler 4xe model, and 91,844 Grand Cherokee 4xe models. The company confirmed 19 fires and 1 injury across all affected markets by the time the recall was filed. A permanent remedy was still under development at the time owners received their letters, with Stellantis only saying a fix was imminent. Until then, no charging, park outside. The Chevy Bolt is GM's compact electric vehicle, and it sits at number 1 on this list for a reason. This is not a single recall. It is a recall that kept growing, kept falling, and ended up pulling in every single Bolt ever made. 141,685 vehicles covering all 2017 to 2022 Bolt EVs and all 2022 Bolt EUVs at a total cost of $1.8 billion. The problem came from the battery cells supplied by LG Energy Solution, a subsidiary of LG Chem. GM and LG eventually identified 2 separate manufacturing defects inside certain cells: a torn anode lab and a folded separator. At least 1 confirmed fire had spread from a Bolt to a home. NHTSA confirmed 5 fires and 2 injuries in the early stages of the recall alone. What makes Bolt the number 1 entry on this list is how the recall unfolded. GM first recalled 50,932 Bolt EVs from 2017 to 2019 model. On November 2020, that was not enough. In July 2021, the recall was expanded. In August 2021, GM expanded it again, this time to every Bolt ever produced. Owners during that time period was told to keep the charging at 90%, avoid letting the battery drop below 70 miles of remaining range, not charge overnight indoors, and park outside after charging. Then GM tried a software approach for newer models, advanced diagnostic software that would monitor the battery and detect defective modules. That also did not fully work. In 2024, another recall was filed after it was discovered that the diagnostic software had been incorrectly installed on some vehicles during the repair process, meaning those cars went home from dealership still unprotected. The final remedy was full battery module replacement across the entire fleet. GM pursued reimbursement from LG Energy Solution and in October 2021 reached a settlement for $1.9 billion to cover most of the cost. Owners who received the replacement got a new 8-year, 100,000 miles battery warranty starting from the date of installation. And that wraps up the list of 12 cars that are not allowed to park in your garage. From a seat motor in a Kia Telluride to an entire fleet of Chevy Volts. The one thing all of these vehicles have in common is that people who bought them had no idea this was coming when they signed the paperwork. If you found this video enjoyable, drop a like and share it with someone who owns one of this car. Subscribe if you haven't and check out the video popping up on your screen right now. I'm sure you will love it as well. See you in the next one.